Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee and this week I'm in a reflective mood. So as many of you will know from a recent community post that I put out, I lost my father recently to cancer just a few weeks ago, and it's been a very difficult period for the family, both in his last few weeks in hospice and of course the time up to the funeral, which took place just a few days ago. And this is why I haven't been posting much, well, anything really, for the last month. I didn't have the mental energy to concentrate on anything other than the situation in hand. Now, I don't want to linger too long on that subject. It's not why you watch my videos, and I'm eager to try and get back to some semblance of normal life, hobby activity, and of course filmmaking. But I did want to thank everyone who's messaged me both here and on Facebook, sending in condolences and sharing personal stories. They've been enormously comforting, and once again they show what a wonderful community we've built on this channel. Thank you for sticking with Miniature Adventures while I've been gone, and I promise I'm going to try and get back to a normal schedule going forwards. So let's crack on with this week's talking point, and somewhat inevitably it's related to the events of the last few weeks. Now perhaps naturally I'm in a somewhat reflective mood, looking back at my life and taking stock. Now while we were in the hospital and in the hospice with my dad, I was shown a photo book of pictures of his lifelong passion, scuba diving. Now many of these pictures I've seen before, but there were quite a few I hadn't, and I was struck by this wonderful record of a life filled with adventure and the hobby that he loved. It was his absolute passion. Now I had a camera from a very young age, and of course I've been taking photos of hobby activities, shows and games ever since I started gaming, and it naturally went into overdrive when I started my blog back in 2009, and I expect many of you will do something similar either on a blog or here on YouTube or Facebook or other social media. And of course we like to think these are permanent records, that what we've created in the cloud will somehow remain for all time, but that may not necessarily be the case. So I've been giving great thought to my father's example and creating a personal photo book of my particular miniature adventures. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, I haven't really been able to concentrate on much at all recently. The one thing I did find I was able to do was spend time curating my photo collection, which runs into a couple of 100,000 photos. No, you won't be surprised to hear. This is the sort of huge job that you'd normally never find time to do, but of course it was easily achievable spending 12, 13, 14 hours a day sitting in a hospital. So my initial motivation was of course to gather together the many photos I had from childhood of my parents. You know, we all knew where my father's illness was taking him, so I was collecting together some photos of him that I was inevitably going to need for the funeral. Now this of course revived many great memories of family holidays, trips to museums, adventures with my father who had an insatiable appetite for military history, which he inevitably passed on to me. But in the process it also gave me a chance to reflect on over 40 years of gaming through the pictures I'd taken of my hobby. Now unfortunately, much of my early gaming career I was the only one who regularly carried a camera, so I was the one taking the pictures and was rarely in front of the camera. Nowadays everyone has a camera in their pocket, and most of us don't feel in the least bit self-conscious about taking selfies to record our miniature adventures. Now I do have a few early photographs, but really it was only when I started writing a blog back in 2009 and later when I joined the Rejects and got back into wargaming on a regular basis that I also started making a photographic record of my hobby. Now the problem is that in the last 15 years I've shot tens of thousands of photographs. I think my total is well in excess of 200,000 pictures now. You know, of games I've played, shows I've attended and that sort of thing. And pretty much ever since I went digital, sometime around 1993 or something like that, all of my pictures have been saved in the cloud rather than printed. Now I've always been diligent at putting those photographs into digital albums with descriptive titles and tags where possible to help me find them. Most cloud storage systems have really good AI supported search functions that enable you to go back and find things, but inevitably they aren't perfect. So while I reckon I can find most things that I've taken a photograph of, sometimes you just have to do it the long way and hunt through thousands of pictures. Now, while I've been reviewing my photos over the last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time hunting down pictures of my miniature adventures and ensuring that they are properly labelled so that I can find them. And in particular, I've been curating a collection of key photographs of my hobby that I want to use in my own photo book, just as my father did for his hobby. Now, it has to be said that this project is going to take ages to do properly. I've made a really good start, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, and that's before I even think about how to compile them into a book. You know, there are many different online apps for making photo books. I just need to find one that can accommodate the size of my collection of photographs without costing a fortune. Now, I've been using one particular online app, but it has to be said that it can be quite expensive when you have a large number of pages that need to be included. I mean, that being said, if I was to spend, say, I don't know, £50 to £100, for example, on a comprehensive photo book of my hobby, I wouldn't actually consider that to be wasted money. I would actually think that was reasonable, but keeping it below that level is going to be difficult because I've got so many pictures to include. Now, I don't expect that if I dropped dead tomorrow my family would never get to see my photos online, but I may just pick up that book and pass on that record of me and my hobby. Maybe I'm fooling myself, but I like to think that in a couple of generations' time that book will still be passed around, telling the story of that happy, ridiculous ancestor who refused to grow up and still played with toy soldiers way beyond childhood. So, a hobby update now. So, as already indicated, I haven't actually done a lot of hobby stuff in the last few weeks. I haven't been entirely idle either. Back at the beginning of August, before my dad was actually admitted to hospital, I placed an order for with Bacchus for some Saxons, Vikings, Normans for a 1066 campaign using Little Wars TV's Raven Feast rules. Now, I'm expecting to receive these in the next day or two. I've had a notification to say that they've been dispatched, and then I can start mounting them and priming them ready for the painting challenge, which starts towards the end of December. Now, I'm determined that this year I'm going to use the painting challenge to actually turn out a project, because last year I went into the challenge with bits and bobs. It was all a little bit vague and I didn't get as much done as I would have liked to. And I've also been working on some base labels for all the models, giving some serious thought to how I'm going to base the figures themselves, because in previous projects I've often left this to the last. Essentially, my plan is to copy what Little Wars TV did when they used their Raven Feast rules for their 1066 campaign. So I'm going to be using 20mm bases, square bases, that have 2 strips of 4 figures on each base. Cavalry bases will be 3 or 4 mounted figures on them, but I have to look at the figures and see how many I can fit onto a base. So my Saxon army will be about 34 bases, and that includes the leaders. The Vikings will be about 29 bases, and by my calculation the Normans 24 bases. Now, all of these base labels include the core stats for each type of unit that have already been plotted and printed, so that I can cut them out for sticking onto the underside of the bases. But one of the things that I want to do before I stick them onto the bases is to have a couple of test games, just using the stat blocks as proxies for the models, before I start painting them. Now, it's just so that I can get an idea of the rules firmly established in my grey matter and figure out if there's anything else that I need to do before I start the project in December. I'm making it sound like I've done a lot, but actually none of this adds up to more than a few hours work so far, and spread across the last 4 weeks. But it's a start, and it's given me something to work on for the next few weeks as I get my painting mojo back. Now, something I'm planning on doing is running another Test of Resolve War of the Roses game in the Shed of War. I had scheduled a game for the group for last week, but obviously that plan went out of the window and the game has had to be postponed. So one of my tasks for next week is to get hold of Stuart and the rest of the guys and try and settle on a date for me to bring my alternative version of the Battle of Bosworth to the Shed of War. But I'll tell you more about that in due course. Now, for a Workbench update, obviously there's not much to show. I haven't really been doing any painting at all. I'm not sure if this qualifies as a Workbench update as such, because I want to talk about making these photo books that I mentioned earlier. Now, as well as doing this big project, I've also been looking at trying to bring some of my smaller games as little examples of projects that I've done. So, you know, like my Wars of the Roses stuff, it took over 18 months to get on the table. I'm really pleased with how it looks and the photos that I got from the final game. So, you know, I've made myself a small photo book of the game and some of the preparation that went into it. Now that's yet to arrive, but I will show you some pictures of that in due course. The book itself wasn't particularly expensive, but it's a nice keepsake of a project that I have put a lot of work into. It's also a handy way of showing my hobby off to my family members who never look at my blog or my channel. I'm afraid I do have a lot of relatives who are very old school, and if it isn't printed, it completely passes them by. So I'm planning on doing something for other projects that I've done, and at some point in the coming months I'm going to put together a photo book on my French Foreign Legion project and the game Bow Hunks that I ran at Broadside a couple of years ago. And casting my net further back, I'll also be doing another photo book of my Long Range Desert Group Raid on Barsh game. Again, I ran in Broadside, I think it was 2017. And I have a wealth of other photos, you know, from my Punit War collection, and in particular Battle of Trebia that I ran for the Rejects back in 2019. So there are lots of little collections that make a nice little photo book just to show off my models and my hobby, something printed that I can put on the shelf. So this week's book review is not actually a book review, it's a magazine review. To be precise, it's 2017 special edition of Medieval Warfare magazine, which focused on the 1066 and the Battle of Hastings. In fact, the whole special edition covers a range of subjects, including some of the other battles that took place, but also some interesting side topics like exactly how do you transport an army across the Channel in medieval times. This is pretty much the only thing that I've been able to sort of really concentrate on and read over the last month, because it's all short chunks of information. You know, found it really hard to concentrate on anything more chunkier than that. But this has actually been really interesting. I only bought it because I took part in the Great Wargaming Survey, and if you complete it, you get a voucher off any purchase of the Carawanserai online shop. So I was just scanning through and I came across this special edition, which was perfect for my new project. Now, the magazine looks at and discusses the contenders in 1066, William Duke of Normandy's background and military training, the path of Harold Godwinson to the throne, and the Viking challenger Hardrada. There's also articles on Fulford and Stamford Bridge, as well as the Battle of Northam, which took place in 1069. So what you get is a really good overview of this particular period and the turbulent transfer of power from the Saxons to the Normans. Now, there are of course loads of books on this period, and I've quite a few myself, but this was a really good primer for the period, and as you'd expect from the publishers, it's very well written. And if you can get a copy and have an interest in this period, then I think it's especially a useful edition, an interesting way of looking at the period, and for the cover price I thought it was actually very good indeed. So next week I'll try and return to my normal schedule, and once again I want to say a big thank you for sticking with me during the last few weeks of inactivity on the channel. As always, please join in the conversation in the comments below. I really do enjoy reading them, and if you found today's video interesting, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from the channel going forwards, please tap the bell notification, and of course please also check out the community tab for extra updates in between videos. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course keep rolling on.